The numbered treaties. History is the past as is described in written documents and the study thereof. Indigenous history is something we left ignored for so long, but as a united nation, we are finally approaching it and addressing it. There are approximately 1.7 million Indigenous peoples in Canada. The trauma that they had to endure is still in effect today for every single Indigenous person across the world. The numbered treaties were a series of 11 treaties made between the Government of Canada and the Indigenous peoples. They were an effort to assimilate the Indigenous peoples into white culture and society. When treaties were being signed by the Indigenous, it was actually unfair to them because of certain treaty terms and errors in translations. The treaties were also unfair because during the first two, it was claimed that the government used a lot of verbal promises that were not upheld in the end. The numbered treaties caused a large loss of freedom for Indigenous peoples. They felt stuck because they had no one to turn to for help in a time of need. Indigenous peoples suffered a loss of freedom of culture, freedom of tradition, freedom of land, and freedom of belief. The first 7 treaties cemented Canada's case to lands north of the U.S.-Canada fringe, empowered the development of a national railroad, and opened the terrains of the Northwest Territories to agricultural settlement. The last 4 treaties encouraged access to common assets in northern Canada, opened the West for settlement, and furthermore verified an association between British Columbia and Focal Canada. I'm sure a lot of people, at some point in their life, have felt completely lost, felt unworthy of living, or left out because of insecurities. And this was a common feeling for Indigenous peoples all throughout history. I remember when I was younger, and even sometimes in my current life, I have felt so lost with life as a whole, feeling worthless and so different from everybody around me. I can't even imagine how these people felt when they were completely and utterly assimilated from people from their own country. They had similar feelings to me, but to a much more worse. In 1876, Big Bear refused to sign Treaty 6 because he felt that his people would lose their freedom and right to follow traditional lifestyles. I think he did this because he was starting to realize what the government was doing and attempted to prevent it. Similarly, another First Nations leader had considered walking away from the negotiating table during Treaty 1 because he was so disappointed in the bargains people were trying to make. I think all of this just goes to show how strong these people were while pretty much fighting for their lives. Today, these agreements are upheld by the Government of Canada, administered by the Canadian Aboriginal Law, and overseen by the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. However, the numbered treaties are criticized and are a leading issue within the fight for First Nations rights. Now that all of this has been said, I hope that you took away something from this presentation, and I also hope that in the future we can stand together as a nation and do what Canada was meant to do.